Hey guys, Becky here with Design Bundles, and I'm super excited to have you join me today because we have another really awesome Silhouette Studio tutorial. We are talking all about using your offset tool. All right guys, so let's talk about one of my favorite tools, which is the offset tool. Now the offset tool is very useful. There are a lot of different ways that you can use the offset tool that are kind of thinking outside the box. So I'm going to go through some of those with you today, but we're also going to cover the basics. So I think this is a really good tutorial for both beginners and more intermediate users. Now, let's talk about the very basics of the offset panel. It is going to be over here on the right-hand side. It looks like a star with a border around the outside, which is a pretty accurate icon representation. If you click on it, it is a very small panel. There are not a whole lot of options. It's pretty straightforward to use. If you struggle recognizing the icon, that's okay. You can come up here to Panels, and you can choose the offset panel right here under the list. Now, most commonly, we are going to see the offset feature used to offset text or a design. Now, what I mean by that is you will create a border, select your text, click offset, and automatically a border is created. Now, you can increase and decrease the border depending on how you feel. I tend to venture towards thinner offsets whenever I am using this for layering, which a lot of times that's what the offset is for. So when I talk about layering, let's show you an example. I use a lot of layering whenever I use patterns. So if I have a pattern and I want to really make it pop or stand out, I can add an offset. And what this does is it really gives me that division for my pattern. All right, it gives my text an outline that makes it easier to read, and it helps the pattern to stand out or really to pop for my project. Now, obviously you can create a border and not use a pattern, but I figured this was a pretty telling project to be able to show you the difference. I used this a lot when I first started making water bottles and tumblers and those sorts of things because it's a really great way to add dimension to names and different logos or shapes that I may be using for those types of projects. So definitely don't feel like you have to use it with a pattern, just one example of creating offset with text. So if you were to cut this design, you would simply separate these two, proceed to cut the first part, move it off the mat, and proceed to cut the second part. And then of course for adhesive vinyl, you would use your transfer tape for layering. For heat transfer vinyl, you're going to have your built-in carrier sheet, and then other materials you can do that manually. Offsetting text, speaking of other materials, offsetting text is really useful when you're cutting letters out of cardstock, because it gives you a nice border to be able to center your letters and line them back up. So if you are cutting letters for a handmade card or a scrapbook layout, or maybe you're making a banner or, I don't know, a cake topper, there are a lot of different things that you can do, and creating the offset helps to keep your letters looking nice when you piece them back together. So while we are talking about fonts, let's go ahead and talk about thin and thick fonts. Okay, obviously this is a thin font. Now, that's not usually a problem, except if you are trying to cut this in a smaller size. Really, anytime that you're cutting any type of regular to thin font in a small size, you can have problems weeding it. This font in particular, because it's thin and long, you will have problems weeding it out of adhesive vinyl or even cutting it on adhesive vinyl or cardstock or anything like that. Glitter heat transfer vinyl is also another one that doesn't take a lot of detail well, okay? So what you can do if you're just really digging this font and you say, hey, I want to use this for my project, you can create an offset to thicken it up. Now, this size offset, you are going to want to keep it small. A lot of times I will move my offset all the way down to 0 and then just slowly increase. Now I know that that does not look like much. Let's group that together. But if I fill it in, you can actually see it's quite a bit thicker than the original font. And of course, the more distance I input for my offset setting, then of course the thicker the font is going to be. The same can be said for a lot of thin lines and designs, and using the offset tool is a really great hack for thickening those up so that you get a better cutting and weeding experience. So let's talk about creating designs. Now, a lot of times you'll create designs and things like this, Hello Handsome, where the letters may dip down below the actual bottom of the text, it's going to run into some of the other letters. Now, this is just one example. This happens to a lot of designs. I can go ahead and weld this together if I am doing it all in one color. If I want to do this in separate colors, that's okay. Technically, I can layer one color on top of another. But what I actually prefer to do, and I feel like it gives more definition to my design, is I will create a small offset, usually around 0.05. Go ahead and apply it. And I'm going to hold down my Shift key. My offset is still selected. And I'm just going to click on Handsome. I'm going to come over to my menu and hit Subtract. Now, can you see what happened? It subtracted that offset from my design. So what that means is that, number one, I can line this back up. Okay, this is really good for layering because it allows me to piece this design back together without really having to get it exact. But also, it gives my design definition in that area to be able to look at it and see it as two distinct designs. And then also it shows, hey, hello is on top of handsome without actually having to layer it. Now, why don't I want to layer it? Well, the problem is that sometimes when you layer vinyl, then that part doesn't stick as well. And a lot of times you can see where that layering is going on, where you have one vinyl on top of another. If you're using adhesive vinyl, you can actually see an indentation of the vinyl underneath. Now, yes, I could have subtracted hello from handsome all by itself without doing the offset. But guys, the offset is very, very useful in this situation, just because it really does give that extra definition around the letters. Now, I did color that in red, but you'll see if I color it in black, now instead of having a design that just looks like it's all running together, I have that separation in the design to show that it is in fact two separate pieces. Now, of course, I'm oversimplifying this process, but when you are combining multiple elements, creating a small offset and subtracting it out can really give that division that your project is looking for. Now, another really great thing that an offset can do is it can take a regular SVG file, and of course, let's give it just a little bit of sprucing up. Okay, so we have this really great SVG file. And what I want to do is I want to turn this into a print and cut. More specifically, I want to turn it into a sticker. Now, this will work for sticker sheets. This will work for planner stickers. This will work for print and cut adhesive vinyl, print and cut iron-on transfer sheets. There's a lot of things you can use this for. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an offset. Now, for a sticker, usually you want to bump it up. Usually stickers have pretty decent offsets. So I'm going to hit apply. And then one thing you do want to be on the lookout for, see how I have this small piece in here? So let's get rid of that. I can release the compound path and I can just delete that out. So let's go over to the send panel. And what I want to do is select the SVG and just click no cut. So now whenever I send this to print and cut, my offset will be the only part that cuts. And that's really useful because it's going to give me that sticker look that I'm going for, which I know is not the look everybody goes for. But if your sole goal is to set out and create a sticker, then this is how you would do that on your own to give yourself that sticker look. Speaking of print and cut, offset is also very useful if you are setting up a manual print bleed. Now, I'm not going to get into this a whole lot because now Silhouette Studio has an automatic print bleed that you can turn on. But just know that that is a thing. I used to use that a lot for not only print and cut, but for sublimation also, because a lot of people do print sublimation designs from Silhouette Studio, and giving yourself that manual print bleed will allow you to make sure that if you're using a substrate that has a certain template, that you can make your design slightly larger so that you don't end up with any awkward white space around the outside. And last but not least, let's talk about giving yourself a few different text effects. Now we do obviously have a video on different text effects that you can make in Silhouette Studio. So if text is your thing, this is definitely something that you want to check out. Okay, so I've created 3 exact copies of the same word with the same font. Now the first one we already talked about, that is your regular offset that is going to give you the layering around the outside. Okay, so I repeated that and we are just going to put it here as an example. Now the next one we are going to repeat the same process. I'm going to make it just a touch smaller, but this time instead of just adding the color and layering it, we are going to select the design and the offset. We are going to right click and make a compound path. Now all of a sudden, all we have left is the outline of the text, which again, if that's the look you're going for, really, really cool. There's one more easy text effect that you can make. We're going to do the same thing, create one offset, group it together, but then we are going to create an offset of the offset. And now let's take all of this, make a compound path, and obviously we have a much different text effect because we have an outline around our entire text. So really, really cool. 3 different text effects that you can make in Silhouette Studio. So guys, that is 6 really great things that you can use the offset for. It is a very, very useful feature. I just really cannot stress enough thinking outside the box using the offset. It's really great for creating those borders. It's great for separating out designs. It's great for adding a pop of color or accenting text or designs. It's great for making your own printables and your own stickers and that sort of thing. I just think that everybody really should take a good amount of time out of their crafting journey to really learn this tool, because I think it will really surprise you once you start thinking of it in some new and creative ways at how much it will really, really help you throughout your crafting. So guys, how did you feel about learning more about the offset tool? It definitely does a lot more than a lot of crafters realize, and it is obviously one of my favorite tools to use for designing and also just for crafting in general. Now, of course, if you have any questions or comments, please make sure you leave those below. I absolutely love to hear from you guys. I also love to receive your video requests, so make sure to keep those coming. And guys, if you learned something today, please make sure you give the video a like, share with a crafty friend, and subscribe to the channel. That way we can keep the little channel going with all of your support and keep bringing you these videos in the future. So I'm going to wrap it up for today, guys, but I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate you, and thanks again. We will see you next time.